This is the Self-Employed Mum podcast, the raw, honest truths of what it takes to be a mum and an entrepreneur. Running a business while raising small humans is an entirely different ballgame, and if you, like me, are in the thick of it right now, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Rhiannon Loudon, mom of two, proud entrepreneur, and CEO of two small businesses. And my guests, women who are juggling all the plates, building businesses while raising the next generation. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like, follow, and spread the word to help keep this podcast going. Now on to today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Small Fish Big Pod. Today I am joined by Kate Flory, founder of Kapow Coaching, confidence and mental fitness coach, and of course, mother. Hi, Kate.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining us. I am so interested right now in hearing more about coaching and, people that are really taking a sort of interest and investing time into themselves. So I think this is a really good time coming up to the new year. We're recording this at the start of December, when everybody's kind of thinking about, and I'm always conscious of the word resolutions, but when everybody's thinking about maybe making some changes or reflecting back on things that they could do better. So thank you so much for coming on to speak to us about what you do. And having said that, can you tell us, what is a confidence and mental fitness coach?
Yeah, so I actually have been coaching for 21 years, so quite a long time. And when I first started out, literally there was you're either a life coach or possibly an executive coach. So people didn't really have titles about what they did. There was certainly no niching because literally there were very few coaches out there. And in fact, when I started, there was a lot of education about what a life coach is, what coaching's all about. If I started to talk to people about coaching, they would automatically think sports coach, anything to do with sports teams. People even thought about buses, coaches, they really didn't know what coaching was all about. And I got into coaching partly because during my 20s, I'd gone through some difficult times. And when you're at that stage where you think something has to change, and I didn't know what to do, I realized that the only way I could change it was by me changing either how I viewed what was going on. Part of it was changing my language. I saw the world very negatively. I felt very downtrodden and done by, and I had to shift and change that. And so I got into self-coaching. I really got into the, I think it was Louise Hay's, all about power of your mind. And there was a Fiona Harold who were all about life coaching. So they were the big names back then in personal development. And so when I first started out, it really was about how could I make my life better? How could I get back in control of my mind and how I just viewed the world and how I just felt, basically. And so for years and years, Rihanna, I didn't think about what type of coach I was. And as the coaching industry has grown, and actually more and more people are aware of the powerfulness of having the space to basically talk to somebody in confidence and to have them really support and encourage you. So that kind of world, that coaching world, has grown so much that I then started to think I needed to say what kind of coach I was. So the long short answer is I chose being a confidence and mental fitness coach, partly because a lot of my clients were coming with confidence issues. So they would come in saying, going back to work after being, having time off mat leave, or people coming and saying, I'm at that stage in my life. So often it can be the menopause stage as well. Women come to me where they're just, they're not quite performing. They don't feel as if they're doing as well as they could be. Often it's a role. So I've had a lot of directors and chief execs actually who struggle with, am I doing my job correctly? Am I doing it right? And often the word imposter comes up. I feel an imposter in my role. So, in fact, it was the clients who were coming to me that made me realize, okay, confidence is one of the things. And it's something that I think, if everyone's honest, we've all suffered from confidence issues. I certainly have. Um, and so, I know how I managed it. And so it was like a mixture of what I had felt previously and still overcome now and again, but also what clients were coming to me. And the mental fitness was a big thing. Again, during COVID, I really got into the sort of mental fitness through a particular program. And it's about how do you shift that mind from that negative to positive. And because I'd recognized I had done that way back in my 20s, it was something that I'd always believed in and always tried. And it gave a really kind of powerful structure to that's how I became a confidence and mental
That's
fitness
brilliant. And
coach.
I think what's quite interesting about your story is that your own experience with coaching is kind of what drew you to it and made you sort of develop. I know you said at the beginning you didn't have a niche, but you sort of found your niche almost partly through your new experience as a coach, but partly through your experience being or coaching yourself, I guess, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you meet other coaches, they've all come often because there's a trigger. Same like anybody who comes to coaching, there's a reason, there's a trigger, there's something you want either more of, less of, to be better, or not to be as bad as. There's always a reason you come. And I think the same with coaches. You come to it because there's a reason that it's helped you and you believe in it. And it's something, the whole world of personal development and the power of coaching is something I've believed in for years, absolutely for years. In fact, I hadn't told you this before, but I became a mom quite late in the day. I was in my late 30s, and I'd always said to my partner I didn't want children. And he kept saying, "Oh, you'll change your mind." And so I basically hired a coach when I was 38 to decide if I wanted to be a mum or not. And that was the purpose of going to my coach and saying, "What I decide, am I going to be a parent? Am I going to be a mum?" And I use coaching to explore, do
That
I
is
want to be a
so
mum?
interesting. So tell me this, because the more that I speak to sort of coaches in different realms, and as you're speaking there, coaching in some ways sounds like therapy to me, but it's different. So can you
Mm,
explain to us, I guess, a little bit, how is coaching different than therapy? Is it approach? Is it results? Is it, yeah, explain that to us.
yeah. So there are lots of similarities, but the key difference between therapy looks
Mm-hmm.
invariably at the past, what's happened in the past, the triggers, how you've reacted. And coaching's more forward thinking, is that positive solution focus. What is it you want to change? What do you want to be different? It doesn't ignore the past, it acknowledges it, but you don't go into the details, the depths of it. Coaching can literally be one session. You can have one coaching session and just think, "I'm sorted. I know what I'm doing." You have that moment where you just pause with that person and they come up with their own ideas, their own solutions. Whereas therapy tends to be a bit more long term. You might see a therapist for months, for years, in fact. So timescales are different, content is different. Obviously, the training will be different, but there's huge similarities. That's the other thing I have really noticed now as a coach compared to when I started 21 years ago. There was a real clear line between what a therapist, a counselor was, what a coach is. That line has gone a bit shorter. You, as a coach now, you have to be more trauma informed. So have that approach, understand that, when people come to you, they have lots of complexity that you need to be aware of, but as a coach, you don't go into. Um, there's lots of coaching that has more, I would say, counseling therapy bias. So coaches now have to be, I think, far more efficient and more adaptive than when I first
Yeah, that
started
it's
out.
interesting how much the industry has changed because, I don't know that much about your industry, but I would certainly say in my own experience, you didn't really hear a lot about coaches up until the last few years. It was, as you say, you had executive coaches and you'd maybe heard of life coaches. But I don't think now there are so many sort of different specialties and so many areas covered. And I'm sure there's good and bad things about that. It's good in the sense that I think more and more people understand what it is, but I'm sure there's some it almost makes it more difficult if you decide that you want to go the coaching route to find who is the right coach, like who is qualified, who is experienced, who is the right person for you. I don't know if you have any sort of tips or advice on that, on finding the right coach.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I often say to people is it's about the right fit. So that's the number one. So my style of coaching will be different from other people's styles. So I'm very much about the whole person, how you think, how you feel. Some people come without any clear goals. They just don't feel right in themselves. Just something needs to change, but they don't know what. And I can work with that from that kind of like, oh, I just feel it's like, okay, well, let's work with that. Whereas some coaches go through a very clear process. You have to have a clear goal, what you want to achieve. So quite linear. Whereas I'm a bit more sort of skating around the houses a little bit, if you know what I mean. So it's about finding the type of coach that feels right for you. You have to feel 100% comfortable. You have to be able to say to your coach things that you quite possibly don't tell anybody else ever. I often get clients who will tell me things and literally will say, I haven't admitted this to anybody, or my wife doesn't know, or my partner doesn't know, work doesn't know, so they will tell you things that are really deep seated. So that trust, that sense of I can really trust this person, and they'll hold whatever I tell them confidential is key. So that connection, that trust, and we can work together. The other thing is often people think that a coach has to have lived your life, understand everything about you. And there's positives in that. So, I'll get people, like I said, with confidence issues. I'll get people who want to sort of feel less stress, less anxiety. I don't have to have had all of their issues to relate to them. But some people want to know, or we have that similarity. So often it's that understanding that, yeah, we've got similar things that are going on in our lives or our past lives. So again, for some people, it's that affinity bias. They want to feel as if we're the same. It's not needed, but often people want that. But qualifications, again, when I started out, getting a qualification, signing up for a membership body. So I'm a member of the ICF, the International Coach Federation, which is one of the oldest coaching, federations, and they set guidelines, ethics, conducts. If something goes wrong, you can complain to them. So you are supported by this body. So finding out if your coach is a member of a coaching body, if they've got qualifications, because the coaching skills are just curiosity, asking great questions, being able to listen as the key foundation, which anybody and everybody can and should do. That doesn't qualify you as a coach. So lots of people have gone into coaching and they've had experience of having, coach-like conversations. So if you want a certified professional qualified coach, then find out what training they've had.
No, that's really good advice. And probably it's a mix of, as you say, like, so maybe you do a little bit of digging, somebody's got the qualifications, they have some experience, you think they might be a good fit. Would it be a good idea to sort of follow them, whether it's like LinkedIn or social media, or have a really solid read through their website so that you kind of you can gauge usually through those things if you're going to get on with somebody or not.
Yeah.
Would that be a good way to sort of get a feel for them?
It would. Absolutely, absolutely. I think I'm going to say it's a generational thing. I'm going to be showing my age here. I would sooner pick up the
Yeah.
phone and have a conversation with them. Um, and and pretty much I would say most coaches, majority of coaches do sample sessions. They call them chemistry sessions, sample sessions, connection sessions. Basically, they will say, just try me out. Let's see. Over the years, I'll have people who say, "Oh, I'm just trying out a few coaches, see how we fit." You get, like I said, you get that feel. So yeah, you've got before you start paying them for their service, test it out.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So now that you've kind of, I guess, talked us through a little bit about your industry and exactly what you do, let's go back to you mentioned a little while ago about sort of confidence, and you used the word imposter. Now, I know
Yeah.
most of us will be familiar with the term imposter syndrome, and I know that you have quite a unique take on that, or quite a unique perspective on that. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about how you feel about imposter syndrome?
Yeah. So so there's lots of research about the I guess the scale of imposter syndrome. I've got some stats which I'll share with you. So this came from a lady called Dr. Valerie Young from the Imposter Syndrome Institute. So with that title, straight away she's gathering data. So what she found was that 70% of successful people reported feeling imposter syndrome at some point in their life. So 70%. Thinking of women, executive women, 75% of executive women have experienced imposter syndrome. 80% of chief execs feel out of their depth. And I mentioned that to you before. I often work with chief execs, male and female, who just think, am I doing the right thing? And the even higher number is entrepreneurs or small business owners experience imposter syndrome 84% of the time. So they're huge numbers. And I'm not ignoring those statistics, because what it's saying that is that the majority of us, one, 8 out of 10 of us, or even more, or around eight out of 10 people will at some point feel as if they're not doing their best job. Somebody's a better expert than them. They'll get found out that they don't know what they're doing. So the majority of us all have these. And it could be situational. So something happens, you have a new job, or it could be a person triggers you, or it's how you interact. So I'm not saying this doesn't happen. After I'd had my son, so I've got 2 kids, and I started to think about how I was going to start getting back into the world of work. Because my daughter, when she was little, was very clingy. And in my head, when I first took maternity leave, I thought, great, how many days I was going to work, building my business up. And it didn't quite follow the plan I had in my head. She had a whole different agenda. And then when I had my son, we'd moved. So the usual support network I had changed. So when he was still in nursery, I was thinking, okay, when he goes to school, I want to be ready. And so I thought, I'm going to give myself a year to get ready to go back out in the world of work, building up my business, just start building up my confidence. Because being a parent, you you know yourself, you end up, the conversations you have are around your children, or around what you're having for your tea, or your partner, or the dog, or whatever, and not about work. So just getting your work brain. And I knew it's going to take a while for my work brain to kick in. And even worse than that, Rihanna, I also hit menopause at the same time. I hit menopause early. So not only, a new mom. My son was 8 months old when I hit the menopause. So new mom, happy brain, menopause brain. So I knew I had, I really had to work hard and getting ready. And I ended up getting an opportunity before my plan. I had this year plan, and it was about 6 months in, and I got an opportunity to become an associate. And I thought, okay, go for it. Not my time scale, but I'd planned it. There's something called your reticular activating system, your RAS, which is basically when you start focusing on something, you filter out all the things that aren't needed. And it's almost like this laser focus. So I knew I'd focus on what I was looking for. And so this had come to me, not quite perfect, but it had come. Started this associate work, and imposter syndrome hit me big time. I thought, what am I doing there? I'm going to get found out. I was juggling with the kids, and it was awful. My confidence was absolutely rock bottom. So I know exactly what those feelings feel like. And I also know that it's an emotion. It's a negative emotion. They're negative thoughts, and that it's about controlling your mind and shifting it. So when people come to me for coaching and they talk about imposter syndrome, one of the things I talk to them is, what if we reframed it? What if we looked at this from a different perspective? And so I often talk to them about how when we are comfortable in what we do, everything's all fine in our world, we're comfortable, we're confident, we know what we're doing. When we step out of that and go into our stretch zone, so this is when you're doing something new and you think, am I doing it right? Am I not? So stretch zone. And in this stretch zone, this is when we start to learn and grow. We make mistakes, we learn from them. We sort of get over an obstacle, and then we feel good about ourselves. It's those little small wins that confidence building is all about, those little tiny wins that suddenly you look back and go, blimey, I started there and I'm here now. So it's building that up. And so I talk to people about that. Actually, that's what we need to think about, is that stretch. And so the actual cycle, there's a pressure performance cycle that this comes from, where it starts from boredom and it goes to burnout. And I just focus more on the so from the comfort to the stretch. And if you stretch too much, you're going to strain, but this stretch zone. And so when people are trying something new, rather than thinking, okay, I can't do it, I must be an imposter, and they start using those labels, I say, well, why don't we think of a different way? How can we talk about, what am I learning? How am I growing? How am I stretching? And I get them to come up with their words. I introduce the notion of it and say, so what is it? What's going to work for you? And everybody will have their own language that makes sense to them.
Yeah, that it's really interesting because, when I first spoke to you and we sort of met and had our first conversation, and you presented it that way to me, I thought that's a really good point, because if I look at my own life, any time that I have taken a leap that was definitely out of my comfort zone, it's always scary. And you always have this period where you're getting used to it, where you're a bit like, did I do the right thing? Do I really belong here? And I've had that in so many different areas of my life. I've had it with, moving from Canada over here. That was a huge change. I've had it with becoming a mum. I've had it with starting, a second business and all of these things. And but you're right, it's not necessarily a negative thing to feel that way and to stop and reflect on the fact that you're learning and growing and trying new things. And I really like that kind of puts a positive spin on what is, quite a negative feeling for a lot of people.
And and when, like I said, when you look at the statistics, anything from 70 to 84% of people will feel this at some point in their life, and we look back, when I look back, I can find moments, it's like, oh yeah, I felt like an imposter there, didn't fit in, and I might not have used the word imposter, because again, that's something that, when I started 21 years ago, no one talked about imposter syndrome. That, I hadn't heard anyone talk about it. It's been really only the past 5-6 years that I've heard people talk about it. So our language changes. But people would say, oh, I don't fit in, or, I'm a bit of an outsider, or, they would use a different terminology that would explain how they were feeling. So that reframe is it gives you a choice. You can look at something as positive, or you can look at something negative. I do this reframing with my kids as well. So when they're doing something that they talk about is really scary, they're really nervous, and I get them to tell me, what does that feel like? And, it's that butterflies in your tummy and, you're a bit anxious and, so they describe it. And then tell them, well, what about when you feel excited? What does that feel like? And they go, oh, it's butterflies in your tummy. And, you kind of feel a bit funny in your body. And it's like, it's the same feeling. Yeah. You can choose, do you want to look at this, go into this party or go into this class as scary or as exciting? You can choose, because your body's saying the same thing. Your brain can decide, is it something to look forward to or something to be frightened of? So, reframing is a real powerful coaching tool. So when people come with me about imposter syndrome, that's one of the things I do. And I do something else as well, because that's just one part of it. So you recognize you have a choice. How do you view it? Change your language. Now, that doesn't stop you from feeling awful. That doesn't stop you from having those signs of stress. And again, everybody feels it differently. Whenever I talk to people about mental fitness, mental well-being, and the symptoms of stress, and I ask, when you feel anxious, stressed, lacking confidence, unhappy, scared, angry, where is it in your body? And everybody will talk about it differently. Some will talk about, front of my head, top of my head. They might talk about in their face or their throat or their chest or their stomach, or they might get tension in their hands. Mm-hmm. Everybody feels it different. So one of the things I talk about is to help with dealing with, when you're in this stretch zone. So recognize it, reframe it. The second is the 3 N's. First is notice. Notice what you are either feeling in your body. So you can recognize, I can't breathe properly, or, I'm feeling all sweaty, or I've got, red face, or whatever it is. Notice. So your body will give you signals, but also your head. So your head will give you that negative chatter of, oh, you can't do this, you shouldn't do that, they're better than you, whatever that is. And you'll recognize it. And when I really work with people in quite a lot more detail on it, I get them to start even identifying the tone of the voice. Is it louder or softer than your own voice? Is it even your voice, or does it sound like somebody else? Is there a different gender to this voice? Mm-hmm. Really hone in, because often our negative voices have a different edge from our normal everyday voice in our head. When we're thinking, oh, I must go and get the meat out of the freezer, or, I've got to remember it's, I've pick up my son's bits from here. That's a different voice from the critical voice that we have. So notice it. The first thing is you notice it, and then you name it. So the second is you name what's going on. Okay, that's my critical voice. And again, when I work with people in detail on it, we really hone in on actually this voice. We get an identity and we create a name. We basically give it a personality. So every person will have different voices, different critical voices in their head. So I have a strong controller. So one of my critical voices, and I think it's partly because I've got my own business, looking after the kids. I go into this kind of efficient, this is the way of doing it. And it's like this controlling voice. But I call my controller Nanny Fix It. It's a bit like, it's the image I have is of Mary Poppins. So you've got a big carpet bag. So the controller goes, right, get the carpet bag out. There's something in here, and I'm pulling out hat stands and solutions. I know what needs to be done. So it's so that I'm trying to fix the problem, and I do it in such a way from that kind of efficient nanny, I'll get it sorted. So I call my controller Nanny Fix It. So if I'm working with clients, we might get playful and come up with a name for their controller that then means that when they hear that voice, it's not them, it's Nanny Fix It.
Oh, interesting.
You're distancing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the ways of of dealing with emotion is you put a distance to it. So you step back. And so by putting a name on it, you're able to go, no, that's not me, it's this voice. So you notice what's going on, body, head, name it. And the third is a new perspective. And you go, okay, so what is it I want to do, feel, think right now? So that's the kind of process I work with people. And so it's like I said, it's not saying you don't feel like an imposter. It's let's reframe it and let's do the 3 N's: notice, name, and new perspective. And then people then get in control. It's getting back in control of not only your mind, but also your body.
That's really interesting. I like this idea of kind of, yeah, having a little bit of a system in place that when these thoughts pop into your head, you can kind of deal with them in a more, I guess, a way where you feel like you have a bit of control rather than just feeling like you're sort of overcome by those feelings. And I wanted to go back to, you mentioned kind of when you were sharing your own experience with imposter syndrome, whether or not you called it that at the time,
Yeah.
as a sort of new mum. And I think that's an interesting one because I think, well, statistically, obviously, it shows, 84% of small business owners and entrepreneurs feel this way. And it kind of makes sense because when you're your own boss, you're making all the decisions. Nobody's given you a job title. Nobody's given you a salary. So it's off, I think it's easy to see how you could fall into that. Yeah, it's all you. Do I really belong here? But the motherhood thing adds a whole nother dimension. And I know for myself, I think when I became a mom, my confidence took a massive hit. And I think part of it is you lose yourself. All of a sudden you're like, I'm Charlotte and Poppy's mom. I'm not Rhiannon anymore. I'm not, I think that's part of it. But I don't think it's all in our heads either, because I think as a society, we tell women they can have it all and they can do everything. But if you say go to a networking event, and I find it happens less in a room with just women, especially if they're kind of small business owners. But if I go to, say, a more corporate networking event and say there's quite a lot of men in the room as well, I feel that as soon as the topic comes up and they find out that you're a mother, there's almost a look of like, oh, okay. Or I've had it before where people have actually said to me, I've explained, I run 2 businesses, I do photography and I do branding. And, I'll say, and I've got 2 small children at home. And it's like, all right, so what does your husband do? I get that quite a lot. And it's almost this assumption of like, oh, so that's just a little game for you. You just do that on the side, but somebody else takes care of you. And it's like, no, actually, my business is doing very well. I could take care of myself if I needed to. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. I must admit, I've not personally, that's not happened to me, but I completely, but what I do hear is more how women, I go to more corporate networking events as well as like women only networking events. And I hear people talk about, I'm just, again, it's the language, I'm just doing this, or I'm just this role, or, we downplay. So again, there's something about the power of words. It's again the words that we use. Words that often put us at a disadvantage. I think these days. So again, I think we were talking before we came on about some of the positives that come out of COVID, and I think one of the positives I have seen is that people who come to coaching, and especially men, will bring the whole self, especially their family, if they've got kids at home, especially if they're at a small age, if they're nursery, you've got the whole juggling. They will bring that in quite comfortably, whereas I think before COVID they wouldn't have, because it was that line between work and home was very clear, and COVID has meant that actually they have merged. And so I have found there's more tolerance. So when it comes to being a parent, I think in some ways is more, maybe it's because that's the perspective I come from. I really appreciate, I really get what difference that's made. As if you're a parent, to have your own business, there's huge sacrifices that you do. You're working before the kids are up. When the kids are in bed, I'm coaching a lady at the moment who that's exactly what she does. She gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning so that she can get work done before she has to take the kids on the nursery run.
Yeah.
You know, and still do a full day job, and then get the kids to bed, and then might do a bit of tidy up afterwards. So she's working 12 14-hour days right now just to grow her business. And so there's, I think, I've my experience, I think that just being a mom isn't what people see anymore. I think there's almost like a badge of honor, I think, nowadays.
That's good. And I think you're right. There's definitely a shift. And I think for me, what I had to, I guess, overcome, or the way I maybe reframed it without really realizing that was what I was doing, I think I knew how I was feeling. And I thought, right, I can go two ways about this in terms of how I sort of market myself and my business. I can either completely separate my sort of home and personal life and my business, not talk about the fact that I have children, not bring up the fact that I'm a mom, or talk about plate juggling or any of these things, and just keep them totally separate. Or I can put them together and be super open and honest about all of the things that I'm dealing with. And yes, that might put some people off, but it might also bring me the kind of people I love to work with. And that's the route that I went, because I am not good at separating. For me, like, I guess similar to what you're saying, to me, life
Oh,
is,
listen.
yeah, I'm a whole person. I can't just be like work Rhiannon and then mom Rhiannon like that. It's impossible to separate the two for me. And to be honest, since I've done that, I've seen the biggest growth I've ever had in my business over the last couple of years. The more that I seem to talk about the difficult stuff and how hard it is to juggle everything, and sort of shape my the way that I work around the assumption that other people are dealing with the same thing, in terms of being flexible, offering evening appointments, people can bring their kids to meetings, things like that. That's where my business growth happened. And I think part of that is sort of a confidence thing, but also part of it is being true to me and what feels right to me, and not just trying to follow rules or these old-fashioned ideas of, well, you can't be a career woman and also a mom and all of that. It's kind of throwing that out the window and going, no, this works for me.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There are old-fashioned rules that we're still having to overcome about, you know, again, when I've worked with career women who they come back from maternity leave, and there is that assumption that maybe you only want to go part-time, or the opposite, that you can't go part-time. And so there are still challenges that women have to face, in the world of work, as well as, in their personal lives. If you're self-employed, like both of us are, growing your own business. So absolutely, the system doesn't always support, but it's about being true to yourself. And that's what coaching is all about, is you being human, being who you are, your values. You operate the way that makes sense to you, your patterns, your systems, your way of doing things. Because when we start looking around us and going, I need to be a bit more like that person, or they're better than me, because then we're not being true to ourselves. That being said, it doesn't mean you can't look around and go, I would like to have a bit more of that, and work on it. But that's where often that confidence and imposter comes in, is when we look at other people and go, I'm different from them, therefore I am. And that's when we get the negative chatter. Therefore, I'm not as successful. I'm not good enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not, we do all of the I am not enough. So yeah, so it's again getting back in control of your mind. And it sounded like for you, it was about going, right, being true to myself, and dare I say it, you're then creating your own niche, because this is who you are. This is the people who you like working with and who you work best with.
Yeah, and I think there's always that fear. I find it with my clients as well. Quite a lot of the time I'll say, right, you should share that opinion, or don't be afraid to show a little bit more of you and your personality and your beliefs and what's important to you. And quite a lot of people shy away from that because they're afraid of putting people off. And I do understand that. Like, I'm quite sort of left politically, and I'm quite, so I do sometimes think, oh, if I talk too much about that, or if I talk too much about feminism, is that going to put people off? But then if I look at the people people that I love to work with, and maybe the people that I've worked with in the past that aren't quite the right fit, it tends to be the people that are sort of very like-minded in terms of, how they think politically, where they like to spend their money, how they feel about, feminism, that kind of stuff. So I think it is a bit of a hurdle maybe to get over to stop worrying about that. But it's interesting how almost anybody that you talk to who's maybe quite experienced with running a business, or has really built up their career, have learned that you don't be afraid of putting people off, because they're just not your people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's again, that's when we get a promotion, or when we have somebody who challenges us, that's often when we go, okay, am I doing the right thing? And you have to do that sense check. And some of your other speakers, I'm sure, who've been coaches or think about the world of personal development, it all comes down to values. You've got to be really clear what's important to you. It's because values are your own moral compass. So one of my values is family. So for me, that means that, family does come first. Doesn't mean that if I can't talk, so I'll talk about family. And you mentioned about bringing, you talk about being a mom and your kids. Often I'll try things out with my children before I try it out workshop wise, so I'll use things and I'll talk to people, about how I do that. Because often, as in a coaching environment, it's often easier to try different techniques out with your family, because you feel more comfortable. And if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. So I'll talk about what I do, if I try something out with my kids, because also it's about making it real as well, because they are part of my life. So yeah, so I'll talk about my values and how they're important. But also for individuals, it's tapping into what your values are, because that's what's going to drive you, that's going to motivate you, and that's going to give you that sense check of, is that person in line with me? Are we going to gel? Because if your values are so different, you will absolutely notice it.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience?
I have had it a couple of times. So with the wedding photography side of my business, I have had it on a few occasions where I maybe go and shoot quite an expensive venue. Um, and not that I don't ever shoot nice venues. I love the venues I shoot. They tend to be a little bit more alternative. The couples I
Yes.
get tend to kind of do things their own way. But occasionally in the past, I've taken on a wedding that was a more traditional than I would normally do. And there's one in particular I can think of where, a very expensive venue, very much like show off to your friends sort of thing. And the couple were very, very wealthy. He came from money. She had married and was marrying into money. And the way that they were actually okay with me. That was okay. But the way they treated the hotel staff, it was like they were the hired help. The way she spoke to her sister, almost as though she was a servant, go and get me this, go and do this, just things like that. And I thought, these are not my people. Like it was very much about showing off. Look at the expensive diamond earrings I've got on the morning of my, it was just about all the wrong things, in my opinion. And you know what, in terms of the experience itself, it wasn't, they were happy with the photos, nothing bad happened on the day, but I left that wedding thinking those were not my people. And I think since then I've been very specific with that business as well as this one about who I like to work with, what kinds of weddings I want to shoot. It's the same with the branding stuff. It's not that I only work with mums. I've got some lovely clients who have decided not to have children. But I do only work with women now, with the occasional, sometimes I'll have a duo and it's a male female team. But for me, I think it's just where my heart is. It's where, and specifically with the motherhood stuff, even with this podcast, it's really shifted more towards that. I'm working on a book right now about motherhood and entrepreneurship, because there's so little content out there that kind of brings these two things together. And I think it is such a two massive plates to juggle when it's hard enough to build a business, but when you're doing it while trying to raise young children, it is so difficult.
I remember so my daughter is 16 in a couple of weeks. So when I was pregnant with her, going, when you have the mums groups, so getting, I can't remember what you know what I mean, where you go and you sit
Toddler
with other
groups
people.
and yep.
getting ready for the birth. And and there were some women there this was their second baby, and so they were talking about what they were worried about giving birth, if they'd had bad experience before, or so they were talking about that. And then when it came to me, what am I worried about? And I was like, I'm not worried about giving birth. My body will know what to do at the time. It's my business I'm worried about. And I literally said that out loud, and I could just see everybody going, she's in the wrong group. What's she doing here? And it's like, that generally was what I was worried about. That was my first baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what, how is I going to keep it going? So yes. So you're right. It's a different world we juggle when we're juggling work and motherhood.
Well, do you know what? That's actually the perfect, just when you said that, I thought, so something that I've been finding quite difficult at this moment in time for me, and maybe you can share some perspective from the sort of coaching side of it. So you mentioned before about sort of comparing yourself and looking at maybe how other people are dealing with whatever's going on in their life. So I have a lot of female entrepreneur friends who are also mums, and I find it difficult because I feel very much sort of similar to the way that you've just shared your story there, in that I was quite excited to go back to work. I wasn't sad about, I mean, obviously, yes, of course, it's difficult as you see your children getting older and that phase is done. But, both times I have been very excited about going back to work. And I haven't felt that pull of, do I only want to work really part-time, or do I only want to go back really slowly? I was like, no, I'm ready to get back into this. And that doesn't mean that I don't love my girls or love having time with my girls. But for me, I am happiest when I have sort of a more even split. But quite a lot of the other mums I know who are in a similar position, as in have young children and are growing businesses, they have only gone back very part-time. And they're quite happy with that. So I'll have a conversation with somebody, and they'll say like, I thought I'd be back almost full time by now, but I'm so much enjoying my time with my baby, and I've really decided that only 10-15 hours, that's good for me. And I know that they don't mean anything negative towards me. I understand that my feelings on that are my own sensitivities and guilt, but it's hard if you're surrounded by a lot of that, but you're going, but I'm so excited, I don't only want to work 10 hours a week. And that comparison, that's where I find it really difficult, is like, is there something wrong with me? Does that mean I shouldn't be a mum because I feel that way? And all of the feelings that, revolve around that.
So I think mother's guilt in all guises is just part and parcel. So number one, you've got mother's guilt, which we all have. So just again, name, okay, this is mother's guilt. So I went through, so to share with you, I went through something similar that, I was dead keen. And yet, because, I was almost 41 when I had my daughter, and I was 43 when I had my son. So I was an old mom. And as I said, I went to coaching to go, am I going to have a baby or not? So it was like, once I decided, that was it. It was a plan. And so I knew that I also wanted to be a mom, however that looked like. So one of the things I did, so coaching technique was, and it's something that anybody can do, is you think about, okay, so you got 5 days, and you think about, just imagine that I go to work 5 days a week, and you just allow the thoughts, allow the feeling. So you really have to give yourself space to feel this. Okay, 5 days, how does that feel? Okay, and then you go 4 days, how does that feel? 3 days, and you go down the scale. And so everybody's scale is different. And so I worked out what my scale was, and mine was like 3 days a week, but it was mostly, so 3 days a week where I would do it, and I'd sort out the children, sort of for childcare, or I would, which was for me was horrific. So I had no childcare. So what I had to do was I worked around times in the morning, either sort of first thing in the morning, nap times, evening times. So my 3 days was spread over 5 or 6. But you can gauge yourself, and everybody's is different. And if you have really listened to yourself, then there's less guilt, because actually go, this is what my body's telling me, this is what my mind's telling me, this is what my soul is telling me. And then what I did was, when I was with my children, it's like, I am choosing to be with my children. When I was with work, I am choosing to be at work. And just again, putting that change of focus.
Yeah, that I like that idea of kind of almost imagining different scenarios and what suits. And I think for me, I probably should have done that, but it's been more of like a trial and error where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to try 2 days, then we're going to try 3 days.
Yeah.
And then I think, yeah, it's that whole, again, people make comments not meaning anything by it, but they'll say things like, they're only little once, or, oh, I don't want to regret that time one day. And then you start to think, oh no, am I going to regret this? And I think you're right, though. I think if you've made the choice that feels right to you, when I go back to it and I think, no, but actually, I do still have quite a lot of time with them. Maybe I am working more hours in total in the week, which tends to be, as you say, I do a lot when the kids go to bed and things like
Yeah.
that. But then a lot of my friends that work in more traditional, say, like corporate roles, they're expected to go back at least 4 days, say, and they'll work from 8 to 5. So they'll have no time with their kids in the mornings. They won't be there after school. Their kids will have to be in after school clubs. So there are other benefits. So yes, I do work more hours, and yes, I work a lot of weekends, but then I have a lot of extra time with them during the week. So I try and kind of do it that way. And if I'm being honest, I mean, I'm tired. I wish I maybe didn't have to work so much in the evenings, but it is working. I do feel like I'm able to kind of enjoy the time that I have with the kids because I've made that their time. And, for the most part, I'm staying on top of everything I need to get done. And so I think, I don't know if you have any sort of advice on the comparison thing, and it doesn't have to be just related to motherhood, but just comparison in general. Like, why do we all do that? Why can we not just be kind of happy within ourselves?
That is a brilliant $1 million question. Because we all do it. We absolutely all do it. So when I think about it from myself, when I look to compare myself, it's to be better than somebody else, or not to be as bad as somebody else.
Yeah.
So we do it to gauge where we are. We compare prices of things. Comparisons is something that I guess we do all the time. It's just what we do. But when we compare ourselves and it's not got that personal development edge, when we're comparing ourselves because we want to be, dare I say it, smug, or feel as if we're better than somebody. So it's coming from, so often we talk about the difference from your coaching perspective or your critical perspective. So if you compare yourself and it's about a coaching opportunity, how could I improve myself? What could I be better on? What can I learn? Then that's a positive comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you compare yourself from that critical perspective, oh, I'm better than them, or they've got less or they've got more, and it comes from that negative place, that doesn't work. So and that sends us down that negative spiral. So comparisons are something we naturally do, but again, it's that reframe. Do you want to compare yourself from that coach perspective, or that positive learn growth, or from that critical negative, and it's that smug, better off, non-values based?
Yeah, no, that's good. I like this idea of trying to reframe it. It's putting it into action now. That's the main. Well, this has been so interesting. I love hearing sort of, and I really appreciate you sharing some sort of tips and advice and some things that people can maybe try and work on themselves if they don't feel like they're maybe quite ready to work with a coach. Just some things that we can all incorporate into our sort of everyday life. Now, at the end of this episode, I'm going to ask you where we can find you. But before I do that, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here because this is something new I sort of came up with as we were talking, but would you share, just to kind of finish off, maybe one thing that you found the most challenging about juggling motherhood and running your business? Like, what has been the sort of biggest challenge for you to overcome, or that you're still working through?
Yeah. So I think for me, my challenging lowest point was when I'd finished breastfeeding my son and my period didn't come back, and I thought, what's going on here? And I hit the menopause, and for me, it was very emotional. So it was, I felt negative. I really struggled. I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't happy. So it was the mood. And so that was the biggest challenge I had, was how to manage that. And I used as many coaching tips as I possibly could, looked at it, and then had to go to the doctor to say, I can't do this. I had to ask for help. And I was put on HRT as a result, which literally transformed me. It literally transformed my mood. But I struggled with that probably for about a year
Oh, wow.
before because I was trying to do different things. And the thing that got me to go to the doctor was my daughter, who was just started, she was in she was still in nursery, and we were doing a behavior chart, where or good girl chart. So she would get a sticker if she did this, or she got a sticker for that. And I said, why don't we do a chart for me so that you can give me a sticker when I do something that you see that's good? And she says, great. And I said, so what should be on mine? And she said, if you smile.
Oh, break your heart.
So at that point, it was like, okay, if my daughter can see that I am not me, I had to do something about it. And so that was the challenging thing, was just going, I needed some help. I needed extra help and had to do something about it. And it took, a 4-year-old to give me that reality check.
No, do you know what? That's quite a good one. And I think obviously menopause adds a whole nother dimension to
A
it.
whole different conversation.
But I mean, women in general, like, so I've got PCOS, so my hormones are a bit all over the place anyway. And I've always found that quite hard to sort of navigate. Quite a lot of people I know have like endometriosis. Like, there's so many different things that women deal with. But even if you don't have any of these things and you're not in any of these phases, like, sort of post breastfeeding or premenopause or menopause, obviously our hormones fluctuate so much over the month. And the world's not really set up for that. The world is set up for men whose hormones are pretty static throughout the month. And so it's interesting. There's quite a lot of content out there on like planning your month around your schedule, like scheduling everything around your sort of hormones and where you're going to be at in your cycle and that kind of thing. And I think in theory, that's brilliant because it does make you feel a bit more in control. And you can go, well, this month I'm going to be this week I'll be really productive. So I'll do this, or that week is going to be difficult. So I'll take it easy. But then work doesn't always work that way. I can't just say, well, I'm not going to take on any clients for 1 week of every month. It's not an easy way to run your business. So there's probably ways that you can, I don't know, maybe factor it in.
That might be a conversation for another time.
Yes, definitely. But it's just, that's such a good, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because that is such a huge challenge and everybody will have to overcome that at some point. And I think the good thing is there seem to be more conversations now about menopause. People are being more open about it. But again, anything to do with women's health just kind of gets brushed under the rug. It's like, oh, it's just hormones, you deal with it. And it's like, if the hat was, on your head, you would be
yeah, absolutely.
No, but that's great. So thanks for sharing that. Did you have a small biz shout out? Was there anybody that, a small business that you particularly love, or anybody that you wanted to highlight before you share your info with us?
Oh, that's a lovely idea. So I've got a colleague, Gwyneth Reese Kenny, who she works alongside me as well, that has her own business. And one of the shout outs for her, she had breast cancer a couple of years ago, and that coming back, working breast cancer, working through recovery, and still worked all the time and worked with her highs and her lows. I think that's huge.
That's amazing.
She deserves an award just for that. So absolutely. So I would shout her out. Absolutely.
That is lovely. Okay, and now I promise I will let you go after you tell us where we can find you online.
Absolutely. So anyone can find me at kapowcoaching.com, and that's KAPOW coaching.com. I do weekly newsletters, so people can ask to be subscribed to that, and they're all about either self-coaching, coaching tips about mental fitness, about inner leadership. So lots of tools and tips. So it's not just me selling stuff. It really is about, because I'm really passionate that anybody could get into personal development, and you don't need a coach. You just need some tools. You need to read a book, a podcast, and you can find your own way. And when you do need a coach, then that's where you can reach me, or email me at kate@kapowcoaching.com. Find me on LinkedIn. So again, search for Kate Flory. And I've just started getting onto Instagram. So slowly building that up. So you can also follow me on that too.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Kate. That was really, really interesting, but also really helpful. And really appreciate you sharing all those tips.
You're welcome. It's lovely having a conversation with you, Rihanna.